A mass grave is being uncovered in Shengal, the ancestral homeland of the Mbao Yazidi minority, 8 years on from the ISIS genocide against a Kurdish-speaking religious group. The latest of many mass graves to be found in the region will be disinterred on the 22nd of February by the local Democratic Autonomous Administration of Shengal, the United Nations, and other humanitarian organizations. The Iraqi government and Yazidi religious leaders will also participate in the formal ceremony. The grave in the Herdan region will be opened at 10 a.m. in the presence of relatives of those killed in the slaughter in the region. Thousands of Yazidis were killed and many more displaced in the 2014 ISIS onslaught, described as a genocide by the UN and other international organizations.
تابع أهالي ضحايا ما عائلة من روجا سيهاشت شلونا هنا نفر كتنا دست داعش دا سبا الفيدري مراسيمنا جبر افتتاحي وهيف ياخدش.
As many as 500 people were abducted and killed in the Herdan region alone when it was abandoned by the Peshmerga fighting forces controlled by the Kurdistan regional government. Around 72 people in the region were also killed by ISIS and buried in mass graves. A worse massacre was only prevented by the intervention of the Kurdish PKK, which worked together with US airstrikes to open a humanitarian corridor into North and East Syria, saving over 100,000 Yazidis. Residents of the troubled Arab region of Deir-Ez-Zor have marched to demand freedom for Abdullah Öcalan, the imprisoned leader of the Kurdish people whose thought and philosophy is now spreading throughout Arab regions of North and East Syria. Hundreds of residents of the town of Siwer and its environs marched on February 20th to condemn the ongoing isolation of Mr. Öcalan. They called on the United Nations and international community to work to ensure the physical freedom of the man who has been imprisoned for 23 years in virtually total isolation in the prison island Imrali. Deir-Ez-Zor, a majority Arab region, which was the last ISIS stronghold prior to the final defeat as a territorial force in March 2019, has suffered a continued ISIS insurgency since then. The ideology of brotherhood of the peoples, promoted by Mr. Öcalan, is finding a foothold in traditional conservative regions such as Deir-Ez-Zor, following the liberation from ISIS rule by the Syrian Democratic Forces. The region has suffered hundreds of bombings and armed attacks, particularly targeting Arab locals and tribal leaders who work with the secular, multi-ethnic SDF. Meaning, such public pronouncements are of particular risk and significance. Turkish warplanes have taken to the air to bomb the Kureja mountain in Iraqi Kurdistan, or Bashur, resulting in unknown damage of casualties. The attack follows a recent uptick in Turkish airstrikes, with 72 Turkish F-16 warplanes recently taken to the air in a coordinated operation against Kurdish and Yazidi autonomous regions, refugee camps, and political, military, and humanitarian institutions. Turkish forces have been using artillery, fighter jets, and chemical weapons as part of what they call Operations Claw Tiger and Claw Lightning, but are struggling to make significant territorial gains. They described the operation as intended to target the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, the militant group which fights for decentralized autonomy in the region. Independent researchers, such as Christian peacemaker teams, Iraq have confirmed that the Turkish forces have been using banned chemical weapons and targeting civilians with both conventional and chemical weapons. The Kureja mountain is located in territory nominally controlled by the Kurdistan region of Iraq, but where Turkish warplanes and armed forces are able to operate with effective impunity. Kurds and their supporters have established a new Rojava Alliance, uniting groups from across Switzerland, Austria, and Germany. The new formation was announced at a protest in Shengal, the major financial and cultural center of eastern Switzerland, and aims to establish transnational solidarity with the struggle of the Kurdish people in Rojava, or Western Kurdistan. The event heard from an international volunteer in Rojava, the Kurdish region, which forms the kernel of the autonomous region of North and East Syria, as well as a speech from local sociology activists. The alliance was informally announced, with protesters putting forward a number of demands. These included Turkish withdrawal from the regions of Kurdistan it has occupied, participation of Kurdish regions in peace talks, an end to economic and military engagement with Turkey on behalf of the relevant local governments, and an end to the criminalization of activists working with or alongside the Kurdish liberation movement. In particular, the protest was called in response to a recent wave of attacks on Kurdish and Yazidi regions of the Middle East. The Yazidi homeland, also known as Sinjar, was hit by at least 20 Turkish airstrikes on the night of 1st of February, with local sources reporting that at least 3 civilians have been killed, which scores of airstrikes also hit North and East Syria and the Kurdish refugee camp of Mahmud. Condemning these attacks, protesters marched through the Swiss city on 21st of February, chanting slogans in support of Kurdish autonomy, democracy and peace and justice in the Middle East. A new teacher training academy has been opened in Amude, North and East Syria, to train new teachers. The new academy has been opened on 21st of February under the slogan, "Without knowledge, no one progresses and pain and suffering increases," and is intended to meet a current shortfall in mid-level teachers. There are 376 teachers in training and learning at the Institute, under the instructions of 50 different teachers across a wide range of disciplines. Shila Mohammed, a member of the Academy's Executive Committee, spoke to address an opening ceremony attended by local educational leaders, intellectuals, and teachers, as well as dozens of members in civil society organizations and students. Hundreds of thousands of students across North and East Syria are studying in a unique educational system which prioritizes dialogic learning and enables children to study in their own mother tongue alongside a second language. But the system faces challenges due to lack of funding, lack of international recognition, and the impact of 10 years of war in the region. Students across the major Arab population centers of North and East Syria have been awarded certificates for their educational achievements. The certificates were presented in ceremonies across Raqqa, Tabqa, and Deir-Ez-Zor, the Arab-majority regions each form part of the federal decentralized system of North and East Syria. All were liberated by the Syrian Democratic Forces during the war against ISIS, meaning that children are now able to access education, whether boys or girls. This is a great joy, not only for our students, but also for teachers and relatives, said Mohammed Al-Hamoud of the Tabqa Educational Committee. This work was done in the home as well as at school. Hundreds of thousands of students were celebrated during the distribution of certificates and other awards and gifts. In particular, disabled students were commemorated in Raqqa, where the March of Faisal Al-Huwaidi Center for Educating the Disabled was recognized for its efforts in this field.